الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم اللهم لك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد بعد الرضا حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه يليق بجمال وجهك وعزيز سلطانك. الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى كل من استنى بسنته واهتدى بهديه ليوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا ثم أما بعد. Tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we are continuing the series that speaks about the history of Palestine and the milestones that took place in the history of this great city and this great land. And I'm honored, inshallah ta'ala, to speak about the life of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, rahimahullah, and the achievements that he has achieved as far as the conquest or the liberation of Palestine and Jerusalem is concerned. Of course, after giving a series about Salah ad-Din by himself, it's impossible for me to speak about him in one lesson. And I find it shameful for myself to speak about such a great man in one lesson. However, the series is about Palestine. So inshallah ta'ala, what I'll do is I'll focus on the main events that Salah ad-Din has actually undertaken to free and to liberate Palestine from the Crusaders. And therefore, the focus of our lesson today, inshallah, or tonight, will be about some of the main events that Salah ad-Din rahimahullah has achieved as far as the liberation of Palestine is concerned. Of course, what was the state of the Muslim world during the time or during the reign of Salah ad-Din rahimahullah? The state of the Muslim world was bad. First of all, Salah ad-Din, yes, he has inherited the achievements of Nuruddin al-Zinki rahimahullah. However, he still had to face the sufferings and the problems that existed in the Muslim world then, which were a weak khilafah. There was a khilafah, which is al-Khilafah al-Abbasiyya, but it was during its dying stage. It was decaying. So therefore, Salah ad-Din does not have a strong base that he can rely on. He has to rely on himself, and that's the first thing. The second thing, many of the lands of the Middle East are actually occupied by the Crusaders, and they have been in it for hundreds of years. So most of the coast cities in the Middle East, especially Palestine, all the way up to Lebanon, the complete coast is under the control of the Crusaders. And strategically, this is very, very dangerous. Why? Because this can always guarantee for the Crusaders who come from Europe what? Supplies, aid, soldiers. So therefore he can never cut their supplies, and he has no supplies. So therefore the state, or what Salah ad-Din has inherited, was something that is difficult to deal with, rahimahullah. One of the important characters, he's an evil person, he has a vile character. Nevertheless, he played a role in the development of the events, especially as far as the liberation of Jerusalem is concerned. And this character is from the Crusaders. His name is Reynald of Chantillon. Reynald of Chantillon is one of the lords of the Crusaders. He was assigned as the Prince of Antioch, and he was the governor of Al-Karak. And Al-Karak, which is located between Egypt and the Sham. So therefore it is very strategic. It's very strategic as far as Jerusalem is concerned, and it's also very strategic because it can cut the line between Egypt and the Sham. And therefore it can cause many disturbances for Salah ad-Din rahimahullah if he is to start a war against the Crusaders. Reynald, even though he was vile and evil, but he was smart. He knew that even though today, and during that time, they were in a peace state with Salah ad-Din, he knew that Salah ad-Din wants to liberate Jerusalem. So he begins to do something that none of the Crusaders has ever done. Actually, he does something that no one has done before him. No one had thought of doing, which is the idea of invading Mecca and Medina. And Salah ad-Din hears about the news that Reynald wants to attack the two holy cities, Mecca and Medina. And therefore the Muslims, as weak as they are, they start trying to stop him. One of the things that they start doing is sending small expeditions to fight him, to make sure that he's busy in his own area. He does not go out. And Reynald realizes that people or the Muslims are actually aware of his plan. So what he does is he begins to build a fleet. The Karak is not on the sea. It's actually inland. It's a territory inland, inside the Middle East. So where does he build his fleet? He builds his fleet secretly inside his fortress. And once he finishes, when you listen to history, you learn the tactics of war. Once he finishes building his entire fleet, he dismantles it into big pieces. And then he puts it on camels, and then he ships it on caravan quickly from his fortress to the Aqaba, and from there to the Red Sea. Once he reaches there, he compiles it, he puts it together, he mounts his soldiers on it, they embark on it, and then they head towards where? Towards Mecca and Medina. A very smart move, because all the Muslim leaders, even Salah ad-Din, were not aware of the fact that he can attack from the sea. The main idea that if this man wants to attack, he'll attack from where? From the land. Now they were sending him skirmishers from the land. So what does he do? He follows, or he uses this particular trick. However, Salah ad-Din before him, and by the inspiration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gave a command to his brother Al-Adil, who was the governor of Egypt, to build a fleet and to place it in the Red Sea. If anything happens, you use it. Al-Adil, the brother of Salah ad-Din, he followed the command of his brother and he built it. Therefore the fleet was ready. But no one expected Reynald to use the sea. At the same time, what Reynald does is that he sends a small squad towards the Sham. So therefore those from Damascus and in these areas, they will be busy with what? With a small squad, and they will think that his main aim is where? Is the Sham. But where is his forces? They are now in the Red Sea. Heading towards where? Heading towards Mecca and Medina. Salah ad-Din hears about this. He cannot reach him. So he sends a message to Al-Adil to move the fleet and to intercept the fleet of Reynald in the Red Sea. Al-Adil does not waste any time. He prepares the fleet and he takes off after Reynald. However, Reynald was faster than him. And a race begins to take place in the waters of the Red Sea. But Al-Adil is not able to reach or to make it or to intercept the fleet of Reynald. So Reynald actually, he gets to the port, he lands, he gets his soldiers down, and he heads towards Mecca and Medina. Al-Adil, may Allah have mercy upon him, he made up for the loss of time in the sea, where? In the land. So he actually, you can say he runs, he actually runs and he moves as quickly as possible so he can stop Reynald. And he is able to intercept him at a plain or a city called Al-Hawra, just before Mecca and Medina. There, on land, he's able to intercept him, and a great battle takes place between them. And despite the fact that Reynald was fully prepared for this particular battle, because he's the one that had the whole plot, and Al-Adil was given a short notice, and therefore he moved his army in a very quick way, Al-Adil was able to stop him. And he defeated him. And Reynald, he withdrew from there and went back to the Karak, and Al-Adil went back to Egypt. Now Salah ad-Din realized that not only he has to protect Jerusalem, but Mecca and Medina also are under a threat. And at any point of time, they can be attacked, and he can suffer the loss of 3 cities. Something that the conscience of Salah ad-Din, may Allah have mercy upon him, can never handle. So what Salah ad-Din does, he speaks to the kings of the Crusaders then. He's Baldwin V, and Baldwin apologizes for the action of Reynald, and then they sign a peace treaty. At the same time, Salah ad-Din, he organizes continuous skirmishes to keep on attacking Al-Karak. And one of the things that he does during this time is that he himself, he builds an army and he attacks Al-Karak. Al-Karak, for people to understand how strong it was the second strongest fortress of the Crusaders in the entire Middle East. And when we are talking about the Middle East, we are talking about the Middle East that we know, including the Arabian Peninsula, including parts of Turkey, which is tens of countries today. Al-Karak was the second largest fortress of the Crusaders. And therefore Salah ad-Din knew that he's not able to win it. He cannot, and even if he besieges it, he cannot conquer it. It's impossible. It takes a long time, and really it took tens of years for the Muslims to be able to conquer this particular fortress. However, the message that he wanted to send to Reynald is that I am here and I will attack you, and I'll do whatever is necessary to stop you. And that's why he made that besiege, the siege of Al-Karak. He besieges it for a period of time and then he withdraws. Of course, he tries to cause as much losses as possible to Reynald. And then he begins to organize continuous skirmishes against the Karak to make sure that Reynald can never rest or can never think again of going towards Mecca or Medina. At the same time, this was a strong alarm for Salah ad-Din. You can no longer waste any time in the aim that you have in freeing Jerusalem. You have to hit, and you have to hit fast. So therefore, the first thing that Salah ad-Din does after he controls and contains the action of Reynald, he heads towards Halab, Aleppo. Halab was under the control of a Muslim ruler, but he was a traitor. He will always sign agreements with the Crusaders and attack Salah ad-Din from the back. So Salah ad-Din wanted to make sure that the Homs and Damascus, and basically his back from the north, is protected. So he attacks Aleppo and he gets rid of the traitor that is in Halab to make sure that he is what? That he is protected from the back. Because his main attack will be going down towards Jerusalem, which is the coast, and south inside the Middle East. And he succeeds in doing that. And then he awaits and he begins to build up his army, and he tells Al-Adil to build a strong Egyptian army for him, and he awaits a chance. Reynald, that vile person, he makes a second mistake. And that mistake proves to be the worst mistake that the Crusaders have ever done in the entire presence in the Middle East. What does he do? There's a truce signed, a new truce. In 1186, he attacks the caravans of the pilgrims, of the Hujjaj, who are going to Mecca and Medina. He attacks them and he kills them and he robs what they have. And they plead to him, they tell him we're peaceful people, we're just worshippers, we're going to perform our Hajj. But of course, as evil as he was, this was not of any interest to him. One thing that sometimes the historians, or the Western historians do, they always, if you read what they have written, they always try to give you the impression that the actions of Salah ad-Din, they actually stem from personal interests. And they do that in a very sly way, in a very indirect way. They always give you the impression that whatever action Salah ad-Din does, it's either because it is something that hurt him personally, or either because he has a personal benefit out of this as a king. One of the situations where they try to do that is in this particular incident. The Muslim historians do not mention the presence of the sister of Salah ad-Din in the caravans. They mention that Reynald, he attacked the caravan of the pilgrims, and Salah ad-Din was furious because of that. Some of the Western historians, they say no, his sister was there. And because his sister was there and was captured, out of personal revenge against Reynald, Salah ad-Din did what he did. Okay? But in reality, this is not true as far as the Muslim historians are concerned, as far as what I have researched. Regardless of whether the sister of Salah ad-Din was there or she was not there, the Reynald, he said a statement in this raid that caused Salah ad-Din, who is very patient, who is very calm, to become very, very furious. What is that statement? Whilst the pilgrims are telling Reynald to have mercy on them and to let them go, he says to them, "Where's your Muhammad to save you?" He says to him, where's your Muhammad to save you? Tell your Muhammad to come and save you now. Once Salah ad-Din hears these words, he becomes furious. And he vows to kill Reynald in his own hands. And if you have read, and I encourage you to read about Salah ad-Din, Salah ad-Din is one of the calmest people that you can ever come across. The calmest and most polite kings that the Muslims have ever known after the Khulafa is Salah ad-Din rahimahullah and Nur ad-Din Zinki, these two people. He's infuriated by the words of Reynald. And he vows that he will catch him and he will kill him and punish him for this particular statement that he made. The Baldwin, the king of Jerusalem, he dies, and a new king takes over, a young king, a pompous king. His name is Guy of Lusignan. He takes over and he becomes the king of Jerusalem. And as far as Salah ad-Din is concerned, that truce is breached and it's broken. So he calls for Al-Adil. He was preparing an Egyptian army for him, and he begins to gather his forces. And he wants to head against the different cities of the Crusaders. Where should you go first? Is Salah ad-Din going to attack or to liberate Jerusalem first? No. The first thing that Salah ad-Din does, he attacks a city called Safaria, or in English they call it Sephoria. Sephoria was one of the fortresses of the Crusaders. It was a strong fortress. It had plenty of water, plenty of provision in it. And the Crusaders, once they knew about what has taken place by Reynald, they knew that Salah ad-Din, he will not be patient anymore. So they themselves began to gather their forces, and they were able to gather an army of 63,000 soldiers. And they marched towards Sephoria. Salah ad-Din attacks Sephoria. He hits them suddenly. He hurts them, but then he withdraws. And he moves away. Salah ad-Din never wanted a battle to take place in Sephoria. Why? Because it is a stronghold for the Crusaders. They are fighting from the base, where they are comfortable. What he wants to do, he wants to pull them out from the comfort and ambush them where he wants them to be. And Salah ad-Din, may Allah have mercy upon him, he is one of the most intelligent strategists in war that the human history have known. He attacks, he withdraws, but the Crusaders do not follow him. All the heads, Guy of Lusignan himself and the rest, they work out the trick of Salah ad-Din. They know that they want him to come out. So that doesn't work out. What does he do? He goes and he attacks another city that means a lot to them, which is the city of Tabariya, or they call it in English Tiberias. He goes and he attacks it and he besieges it. In Tabariya, one of the wives of the knights and the leaders of the Crusaders, his name is Raymond. His wife is they. And this is one of the main cities. And now the Crusaders are confused. Should we leave and go and free Tabariya? Tabariya is important. Or should we stay? And then they begin to argue with one another. And the decision that they make, even Raymond, despite the fact that his wife is there, they say, no, we'll stay here. Why? Because they are safe. But this guy, this king, whose name is Guy of Lusignan, because he's new, because he's pompous, and because of the fact that many of the knights of the Crusaders see him as a coward, he decides to make a new move in his kingship that proves that he is a man. And the Knights of the Templars, they agree with him. And they say, no, we're going to have a war and we're going to go and free Tiberias. And therefore, Guy does exactly what Salah ad-Din wants him to do. And the second trick of Salah ad-Din works. He will draw them out. So they took 63,000 of the best soldiers that they have, all the knights, all the heads of the Crusaders are actually in Sephoria. They all march from Sephoria to Tabariya. And the expectation is that it's a quick skirmish. We'll attack, we'll end the siege, we'll protect Tabariya, and we'll defeat Salah ad-Din. One of the reasons that led them to that is the great numbers that they had. They had 63,000 soldiers. Salah ad-Din, may Allah have mercy upon him, had 12,000 soldiers, gathering all his armies. So the ratio is 5-1. So the army of the Crusaders is 5 times the size of the army of who? Of Salah ad-Din rahimahullah. Right. But here we'll see how intelligence can beat the force. How intelligence can beat the force. So Salah ad-Din, he is about the move. He begins his campaign. The first thing Salah ad-Din does, he studied the terrain from Sephoria to Tiberias. And he found that Hattin, and that's why this battle is called the Battle of Hattin, is the most suitable for what he wants. And Hattin is one of the areas that was dry in its nature. It was a sahel, it was a plain. Next to it there is a mountain, and they had some wells in it. And the Crusaders, as far as they're concerned, because it is a short trip, they did not take much water with them and much food. The idea is, we stop at Hattin, we fill up water, and then we continue to Tabariya. But they did not know that Salah ad-Din is going to stop them at Hattin. So what he does, he prepares the terrain. He dries up the wells all the way from Sephoria to Tiberias. And he makes sure that the residue of water, the wells of water, are only where he is. So therefore he has the advantage of the terrain. May Allah have mercy upon him. The second thing that he does is that he begins to ambushes them. One of the problems that the Crusaders have is the big army that they have. 63,000 is a massive army. So therefore, he will send small expeditions to attack the rear of the army. He will ambush them on the way. And he will use guerrilla war. They'll attack them and retract. Attack them and retract. Therefore, what they were doing, they were slowing them down. They were slowing the army down until he sets up the terrain that he wants. That's the first thing. The second thing, they were wearing them out. The third thing, they were running out of resources. Because they have to fight. Put you in the ring for 5 minutes. You stop, you say, give me water. These people and the Crusaders, they used to wear heavy armors. Unlike the Muslims, they used to wear very light armors. Another advantage is the speed and lightness in the fight. So he drained the resources. He fatigued them and he slowed them. And they reached Hattin waiting and asking for what? For water. They made it there, there's no water. Who is there? Salah ad-Din, may Allah have mercy upon him. And as I said, they are tired. They begin to fight. At the beginning, it's a fierce battle. At the beginning there is a standoff. No one can topple the other. But Salah ad-Din keeps the pressure on them, maintains the pressure on them. And it's a small army, 12,000. But what he does, he uses the strategy of surrounding them. So he tells his forces as much as possible to push them, and then circulate them, and push them out. And he succeeds in doing that. And they begin to actually fall within the circle of the Muslims and maintain pressure on them. The Crusaders, and that's something that sometimes the Muslims don't mention, and some of the Mashaykh don't mention, which is a fault. We should not assume that our enemies are actually always weak and cowards, and we are the mightiest. That's not true all the time. The Crusaders, they fought hard, and they tried to press out of the circle. But alhamdulillah, the Muslims were steadfast. And they kept them away from water. One of the pushes that were made was by Raymond, the governor of Tripoli. He had strong knights, so what he does, he gathered his knights and he attacked in an arrow direction the circle of the Muslims who wants to break through. Because once you break through them, behind them is what? Water. And he does. What Salah ad-Din does, he does another smart move. He tells the soldiers to open up for him. So as he's charging, no one is fighting him. They break the rows and they let him completely out until he is completely separated from the Crusade army. And then Salah ad-Din gives another command, close the circle. And what happened to Raymond? He's completely cut off from the remaining army. And Raymond becomes scared. Why? Because now what the Muslims can do is circulate him and just finish him off. He's no longer part of the army. He has become by himself. As a result, a quick decision that he makes is he continues running all until he reaches Tripoli, which is his city. And he stays there. So therefore Salah ad-Din, he actually succeeds in starting to break their rows. They become more and more tired, despite the large numbers. They go down the mountain, the plain of Hattin. He pushes them up to the mountain of Tabariya, and then something happens that demoralizes the Crusaders. The Crusaders had something they call it Salib al-Salabut. Salib al-Salabut, and I forgot the English term for it, is actually a massive golden cross that the Christians have made, embroidered with all the Jews that you can think of. And they had in it a wooden piece of the cross that they think that Isa alayhi salam was crucified on. And the priests have built inside the Crusaders the dogma that as long as this cross is with you, with this wooden piece in it, you can never be defeated. Therefore, that's why at the beginning the spirit was high, and the Crusaders were fighting for faith, and they were fighting for gain, but also for faith. They believed in the crusade, and that's why to them it was a holy war. They lost that cross. They lost that cross. It fell in the hands of the Muslims, and therefore the Crusaders became demoralized, and the Muslims began to demolish them. And the main fight only focused 150 knights from the knights of the Crusaders who surrounded the king, Guy, trying to protect him as much as they can. And these 150 knights, they were fighting for their life. And really, you can say, as if it's another battle within the actual battle. The rest of the soldiers are nearly gone. There's only now the king, the tent of the king, and those who are around the king. And they kept on fighting. Salah ad-Din rahimahullah is watching, and he realized that these people will fight until they die. So Salah ad-Din, he had another trick up his sleeve. He told the Muslim soldiers to go behind the knights and to knock down the tent of Guy on him. Because after they lost the cross, the main focus of them, the main morale was where? In the king. Break the king, you break the rest. So what they did, they went from behind and they cut the tent and they captured the king, Guy. When the knights saw that, they gave up arms. And the complete army gave up and submitted to the Muslims. As a result, the Crusaders lost in this battle 30,000 lives. So out of 63,000, 30,000 were dead. So half the army is gone, and that's one of the major losses that they had. And the rest were captured, were taken as prisoners, including all the knights, all the barons, and the king himself. And who else? Come on, you have to guess. Who else was captured? Reynald of Chantillon was also captured. And Salah ad-Din calls for the king to come, and who comes with him? Reynald. He sits in the tent of Salah ad-Din, and Salah ad-Din takes a cup of glass, a glass of water and ice, and he gives it to Guy, the king. He drinks from it, and then he hands it to Reynald, the one who said to the Muslims, "Where's your Muhammad to save you?" And then Salah ad-Din looked at Guy, and he said to him, "I gave you the water to drink. I did not give you the water to give him the drink." And then Salah ad-Din looked at Reynald and said to him, "How many times have you betrayed? How many times have you broken your promises? How many times have you breached your vows? How many times have you lied?" Reynald very arrogantly, he tells Salah ad-Din, "This is the habit of the kings. That's what kings do." And Salah ad-Din was a very ethical person. And therefore he was very disturbed by the response of that man. That man is meant to be one of the nobles of the Crusaders. A prince of Antioch, which is the main city, main Christian city in the entire Middle East. And he's speaking in such a low way. So Salah ad-Din looked at him and he was very surprised that such a noble man can be so low. And then Salah ad-Din, he offered Islam to him. Said, "Would you become Muslim?" Reynald said, So Salah ad-Din pulled out his sword and he hit him on his shoulder and he cut his upper body. And he said to him, you told to the Muslims, where's your Muhammad to save you? I am on his behalf. And he hit him on his shoulder and he cut him up. And he left him for dead. And then the Muslim knights, they came in the tent, they drew him out, and then they finished him off outside the tent, and that was the end of that filthy noble, or so-called noble crusader was killed on the hands of Salah ad-Din. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has allowed Salah ad-Din to fulfill the vow that he made, and He allowed him to make nusra of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the Muslims. Of course, the king guy now was shivering because the one who got killed was sitting right next to him. So Salah ad-Din, he tells him to come down and not to flee, and said to him, it's not my habit to kill the kings, but this man has done such and such, and as a result, and I vowed to kill him, and therefore he deserved what has happened to him. And then the remainder of the army were taken as prisoners and they were sold, which was the habit of the entire world back then. They were sold as slaves, and as a result, subhanAllah, they were very humiliated to the extent that no one was willing to buy them. And the market value of a slave went down. No one was willing to buy them, to the extent that the price of one slave would actually equal a golden dinar, which is one coin. But people would refuse to buy because you have to feed them, you have to look after them. So they suffered utter humiliation. And Raymond, the one who fled from the battle, and apparently he saved his life, after he heard what has happened, he died from his anger and grief. And the Western historians, they say he died from his wounds. The Muslim historians, they say he died from his anger and grief. And I believe both have taken place, because he was wounded, and after what he saw and what happened to them, a complete collapse in the Battle of Hattin. Complete collapse. He died from that. Of course, next move is where? Jerusalem. So what Salah ad-Din does, now that is one battle. But what has he gained from the land, from the cities? Not much. So he begins to attack the coastline and to liberate the coastline from the Crusaders. And he captures Akka, and he captures Gaza, and he captures Haifa and Yafa, Beirut, Saida, many of the coast cities. And of course, now I'm mentioning the name of cities that now they exist in different countries. The world did not take the form that has today. All right, so you think southern Beirut, you think Lebanon. That wasn't the case back then. There was no Syria, there was no Lebanon back then. All this was a complete homogeneous region, and they had separated differently. So he frees the coast in 2 months, and he circulates Jerusalem. Circulates Jerusalem. And now he wants to head towards Jerusalem. Negotiations take place, and Salah ad-Din agrees to allow a lot of the knights to go free, on the promise, on the vow, that they don't take arms against him. And one of them is the king, who is now the king of Jerusalem, guy. He frees him after he gives him an oath that he will not take arm against him. However, subhanAllah, as was their habits, as soon as they get out from the hands of Salah ad-Din, what do? They take arms against him. And some of the Muslims back then and after Salah ad-Din, they were sort of, you can say, upset with Salah ad-Din because of that. Why did you let them go? Because them now, what you're going to see, later on they caused a lot of losses to Salah ad-Din rahimahullah. He let them go. As soon as they make it to the cities, they take arms against him again, including the king himself. And the Western historians, they say that he found a priest who said to him that your oath is invalid because it's an oath that was given to an infidel. And Salah ad-Din was an infidel. So therefore the oath that you have given him apparently is invalid. So you don't have to fulfill it. Of course, we as Muslims, alhamdulillah, whatever vow we give to whoever, we fulfill it. That's why the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something to mention, running out of time. Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, during the Battle of Badr, once he was trying to move from Mecca to Medina, the people of Quraysh asked him for a vow that he will not fight with the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam against them. So he made it, and he made it to the army of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Said, Ya Rasulullah, I gave him a vow not to fight, to go direct to Medina. But if you want me, I'll fight, me and my brother, me and my father. So Rasulullah said to him, no, give him the vow, go to Medina, inshallah, Allah will help us against it. But apparently a priest gave the king an excuse. Anyway, he heads towards Jerusalem. Jerusalem, at this particular point, the Haram al-Aqsa, which is the Masjid al-Aqsa and the Sakhra, and what you see on that, the Haram, the sanctuary that you see on TV, was, of course, taken by the Templars with no respect to it. They have divided it. They made one part of it a stable for horses. They made another part of it a church, another part of it a storage house, another part of it houses for the knights to sleep in. Who was there? Crusaders, the remaining soldiers of the Crusaders, the inhabitants of the city, from the Muslims and the Christians, and Muslim prisoners that they have captured from before. So you had thousands of people inside the city of Jerusalem. Who was leading the fight against Salah ad-Din from Jerusalem? Someone called Balian. Now this guy Balian was captured also in Hattin. And he was freed by Salah ad-Din on the condition that he does not take arms. He goes to Jerusalem. He takes his wife and he leaves. Takes his wife and children and he leaves. But Balian, once he made it to Jerusalem, he took upon himself the defense of the city against Salah ad-Din. So look how they treat his mercy, rahimahullah. Anyway, so Salah ad-Din, to cut down on a lot of details, Salah ad-Din surrounds Jerusalem and he begins to bombard it. And he wants to conquer the actual city. Balian proposes a deal to Salah ad-Din that we hand the city to you, but you let us go out unharmed. And then Salah ad-Din reminds him of what they've done to the Muslims in Jerusalem when they took over. And they killed thousands of people. He says, no, I am going to capture that city. So Balian, he makes a strategic move. He goes back, he thinks about it, and then he comes back and says to Salah ad-Din, if you don't accept my deal, we are going to burn down Al-Aqsa. We're going to burn down the complete Haram. We're going to kill all the thousands of Muslim prisoners that we have. And then we'll fight you until we all die. And we'll demolish the city. And if you want to go in, then you go in. Salah ad-Din, rahimahullah, of course, he would not accept for something like this to take place. He takes a few days, he consults with his generals, and then he decides to agree to the agreement, to the deal of, or the proposal of Balian. And he says, all right, on one condition. What is that condition? You give up arms, and you pay each person that goes out from the Crusaders, he frees himself by paying, how much? 1 golden dinar. 1 golden dinar. Not much. Now the Western historians, they say he asked for a massive ransom. He asked for a massive ransom. He asked 1 golden dinar per person. So what takes place is that they give up arms and they begin to go out. And Salah ad-Din, he allows, listen to that, he allows the Arab Christians who are from the original people of Jerusalem to remain in Jerusalem. The Jacobites, the Orthodox, whoever is originally from Jerusalem, he says it doesn't have to go out. So not every Christian goes out. No, Crusaders, who are the invaders, go out. Since the Zionist regime has taken over Palestine, there were around 25% Christians in Palestine today. All right? Since they have taken over, 25% of the Christians decreased to 2.5 today. So the Christians, the original inhabitants of Palestine, under the Zionist regimes, they were what? They were humiliated. And they were decreased to 2.5. And that's why, if you follow the news, you'll find that even the Christian churches in the US are asking their government to stop helping the Zionist regime because of the persecution against the Christians today in Jerusalem. Look what Salah ad-Din has done. You go out, you are invaders. The others, they remain. And what happened is an ironic thing. What happened is that the reach of the Crusaders, they left the city and they left the 4 people with no help. Because if you don't pay the ransom, what happens to you? You are taken as a prisoner. So you are taken as a captive. The Western historians themselves, they say that the rich of the Crusaders refused to help the poor. And they left it. And it is Salah ad-Din himself who would actually begin to pardon them and to let them go without paying anything. Thousands of them. His brother Al-Adil, he says, can I free 1,000? He gets free 1,000. And they begin, and they were around 120,000. The total population of the city. Thousands of them, they are freed. One of the people that refused to help him is the patriarch. His name is Heraclius. Patriarch meaning one of the Christian spiritual leaders. He smuggled his treasures out, and this is recorded by the Western historians. Okay, he smuggled his treasures out of Jerusalem, and he refused to help the poor, the people that they brought to the city. Anyway, Salah ad-Din, he allowed many of them to leave without having to pay the ransom, and subhanAllah, of course, and he entered to the city, and it was during, and coincided with the time of Isra, of the dhikr of Isra and Mi'raj. So he entered, he cleaned the Haram Aqsa himself, and of course he was crying, he prostrated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, takbir and tahleel was taking place, and adhan was called in the Aqsa after 91 years of no adhan in the Aqsa. And Salah ad-Din rahimahullah, he captured the city and he freed the Muslims again. One of the Muslims, or some of the Muslim knights, they told Salah ad-Din, why don't we get rid of the holy sculpture? The holy sculpture, they call it in Arabic Kanisat al-Qiyamah, is actually to the Christians the foundation of Christianity. That's where Jesus was born, Beit Lahem. That's the main church that was ever built for the Christians, the first ever church that was built for them. That's why they do pilgrim, by the way, they do pilgrim to it, from Europe and from the East. They said to him, why don't we get rid of it? We demolish it. Once we demolish it, then the Crusaders have no interest in Jerusalem, because that's where they come and they do their Hajj. Salah ad-Din, may Allah have mercy upon him, he says to them, you want me to destroy a church that Umar radiallahu anhu have approved? Wallah, I'll never do that. And really, even the Western historians, they actually admit to the fact that not all the Muslims leaders said that. Some of the knights suggested that, but this was not even taken serious by Salah ad-Din rahimahullah. Look how the Muslims protected what is sacred according to others during their reign, during the strongest point of might. And look what others have done with the sacred holy cities of the Muslim, holy shrines of the Muslims in Jerusalem, and what is taking place today. And what they have done, they have tarnished the Haram al-Aqsa. And look what Salah ad-Din has done. He refused to touch it. He said, no, we'll not come to it, we'll leave it as it is. And the adhan was called, and Jerusalem became free. Of course, running out of time. Inshallah, I'll put a closure to that. Of course, now the Crusaders have lost Jerusalem and have lost thousands of people in the battle of Hattin. Do you think they will actually let this go? No. And that's when Pope Gregory the Eighth, he calls for a new crusade, which is recorded in history as the Third Crusade, against Salah ad-Din, so they can free Jerusalem again. And they call this crusade the Crusade of the Kings. Why? Because three main kings of the kings of Europe take part in it. The king of Germany, Frederick I, and the king of France, Philip II, and the king of England, Richard Lionheart. Okay, but inshallah ta'ala, I don't want to hold you anymore. It's nearly 11 o'clock. We'll talk about the details of the third crusade and what has taken place in the next week, inshallah. Wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Jazakum Allah khair.